Welcome to the GrowthPulse Podcast, where we take a deep dive into the world of business-to-business sales. We talk to some of the world's leading salespeople, sales leaders, experts in sales technology, and thought leaders in today's best sales skills and techniques. In this episode, we're joined by Brad Austin. Brad is one of the world's leading experts in e-commerce and online marketplaces. Brad started his career in recruitment before moving into the tech space with German tech giant SAP. Working his way through the ranks at SAP, he became one of their leading customer engagement and commerce enterprise account executives. His next career move was to join the Commerce Cloud team at Salesforce, initially as their top commercial account exec, eventually leading the Commerce Cloud team across Australia and New Zealand. Most recently, he joined Marketplacer, one of the world's leading marketplace e-commerce platforms, as the Vice President for APAC and EMEA. From the GrowthPulse team, please welcome your hosts, Dan Bartels and Simon Peterson. Hey guys, how are we?
Very
well, thanks, mate. How are you?
Yeah, really good. Brad, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, guys. Great to be here.
Yeah, really excited. So, how's everyone's weekend and week's been so far? Anything exciting going on?
Nothing overly exciting at the moment. As a dad nudging 40, most of my time is chasing the kids around to weekend sport, but it's been a good one so far, and the weather in Sydney has been magic. So, no, it's off to a reasonable start.
That's great.
Excellent.
I had a good weekend up in the country. Minus 1 degrees when I woke up in the morning. Lovely up there at Mudgee.
Yeah, it's nice. A bit of winter, isn't it? A bit of briskness in the air, but the sun's back out. I know my dog's been enjoying it. We've a couple of walks in the last few days, which has been nice.
Yeah, it's good. Sydney does it
Absolutely.
well over winter. We've got those fresh mornings, and then it's still been nice, sunny, warm days. So if it stays like this, I think we'll be well placed for an enjoyable winter after the last couple of years of relentless rain. So it's off to a good start.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely.
Well, Brad, mate, look, again, thanks for joining the podcast. And we normally start talking to people about sort of their career journey. And you've got an interesting one, not an uncommon one actually. Lots of tech people start off in recruitment and migrate their way across. But look, let's go back to the beginning, mate. You kicked off in recruitment, and what was the impetus to sort of move from that space into the tech world?
Yeah, look, I mean, it is a fairly common story, I think, for a lot of folks that are in all sorts of different sales capacities as well. There's not too many harder places to cut your teeth than jumping into recruitment and being told no that many times on a daily basis. I think it builds a certain amount of resilience in individuals as well. But I think for me, getting involved in the tech space, like most, has happened by accident, really, and by taking advantage of opportunities when they present themselves, and then fairly quickly finding it's a space that is incredibly rewarding and challenging to be a part of, especially having seen so many advances and changes over the last decade. But it's certainly an exciting place to be, I think, with the number of changes that are constantly happening. It's certainly something that it's aligned both with my enjoyment of spending time with people, as well as solving problems and general curiosity for understanding how things work. So for me, it was one of those happy accidents that's now a place that's certainly felt like home for the last decade or so. I haven't looked back after a bit of an exposure to the tech world.
Absolutely. That's a great journey. And tell me, obviously going from selling people to selling technology, what have you found some of the differences?
Look, I think it's in terms of what's being sold, there's always certain differences, but when it comes to sales, the same things are true across the board. It's about delivering value for the customers that you work with, whether it's widgets, whether it's outcomes, whatever it happens to be. The commonalities are there's more commonalities than there are differences, no matter what's being sold. So everything is about returning value to customers. One of the big transitions for me, I suppose, or one of the big changes was going from a recruitment space into selling perpetual technology, then into the subscription technology world. So I think whether it's a one-off purchase or constantly having to return value to those customers that you work with, that's been a really interesting shift over the last kind of decade plus of working in sales as well. So everything being as a service, it's changed the way that we have to work with, or we get to work with customers and prospects in the industry as well.
Yep.
That's a really
And
interesting
Brad, transition.
piece.
Okay.
So, three of us have worked in software as a service or as a service for, and I'm about a decade. Simon, you're probably pretty similar. But there are still so many organizations that are yet to make that kind of transition or talk about it. It's still part of, lots of the business schools talking about that as a service concept. What do you think's the biggest difference that you've seen in organizations that are doing that as a service piece?
Yeah, look, I think it's the best organizations, or the organizations that have embraced as a service options, do it very intentionally. So I think looking at a point where you're understanding what are those areas that you can leverage best practice, you can leverage expertise, and incorporate that into your business. But at the same time, also understanding what it is that makes you unique as a business. So if you're in the most of my world has been focused around supporting retailers and brands in engaging direct to consumer business models. Their differentiation is in the strength of that brand. It's not building technology. It's really around, how can they differentiate their brand in a competitive market? How can they offer better service? How can they offer a better product? And when we're looking at incorporating as many things as a service, it frees up the rest of your day to focus on what it is that makes you unique. How can you compete better? How can you better serve your customers and drive revenue growth? And I think that's something that can be applied to a lot of industries and a lot of applications, as long as you're still retaining as much of what makes you unique and special. Then you should also be looking for how much you can really leverage the expertise and the technology that's available in market as well, without needing to shell out a huge upfront cost. And the other advantage, as much as it's an overly simplistic answer to it, is the fact that if you're subscribing to something, you can turn it off. You don't own an asset that you need to sweat for a long period of time. As trends change, you can keep up with them more quickly and hold to account those suppliers that you work with on a regular basis as well.
How important do you reckon it is to work for companies to work out the financial model behind it? Because it is a different piece, right? I mean, you've sold perpetual, and there's a one-time measure for it, and then they've got the software forever, and then the next piece after that is really, are we moving to this fractional position, but over a longer period of time, and sort of understanding your payback time and your investment cost to actually acquire the customer. It's a really different financial calculation that organizations have to go through. How important getting that right do you think at the beginning is, or is it something you can work out over time?
Look, I think it constantly changes, but it's definitely critical to understand at the start. And it takes a couple of different forms, whether you're spending the time to understand the financial opportunity and the constraints within your customers' environments. It's going to be critical. But one of the things that I have seen change, I think very much for the better over the last 10 years in this space, is the expectation that purchases are made with quantifiable business cases across the board. So my dad was in a very similar industry. He was in a sales profession for a very long period of time. And I remember as a young guy growing up, there was a lot of golf. There was a lot of relationship-based selling that was really geared towards who do you know, who do you trust? And that was how a lot of business was done for a very long period of time. I think there's been a lot of macro factors that have meant that trust is still critical, but it also has to come with a quantifiable business case at the same time. So people still buy from people. That's not going to change, but the expectation that this comes with solid understanding of the financial outcomes of any purchase is only going to continue to increase. And what that then means for sales professionals is you need to understand the language of a financial controller. You need to understand the language of a CFO, and to help those business stakeholders that you're working with to then articulate the value of the product or the service that you're looking to deliver in that space. So, for me, on an individual basis, coming from selling in a recruitment space to being a BDR in a large, German giant, a big part of my journey has been actively going out and trying to find ways of upskilling so I can speak the language of different tiers of business stakeholders. Finding literature, finding podcasts, finding mentors, probably the most important thing, that can help you understand the numbers. So everybody can give a great demo and you can come in and deliver a really fantastic pitch. But if you can't then translate that into language that a CFO and a financial controller can understand, you're going to hit a point. You're going to hit a brick wall. And one of the great kind of mentors that I've had over the time as well always spoke about being able to strike the balance between speaking in PowerPoint and speaking in Excel. So being able to pick and choose depending on those stakeholders that you're talking to. Do they consume visually? Do they consume through numbers? And then being able to tailor your sales pitch, your engagement around the way that that message needs to be consumed and relayed. So, okay, it's only growing in importance. We spend a lot of time in my current team and future teams, bouncing ideas off our own CFOs, so we can then appropriately contextualize those messages for our customers as well.
Okay, so it's interesting. You just mentioned there you started your tech career journey working for a very large German giant. I myself had exactly the same experience at SAP. I joined them in 1994. ERP wasn't really a thing back then, but it was an incredible journey, massive growth, etc. I think you joined them in 2013. I'm interested in your thoughts and experiences working for a big European business, because obviously a lot of us have spent years working for US companies. Some of us have obviously worked at European. What do you find unique about working for a big German software company?
Yeah, look, I've been lucky enough to be exposed to quite a few different corporate cultures. So from the Europeans, then onto Salesforce, and now you're really excitedly working for an Australian tech organization too. There's certainly cultural nuance across the board, a lot of similarities, but certainly, obviously both exceptionally well-run organizations, but the focus around process is incredible. I know that it's incredibly cliche to talk about a German organization being process-oriented, but it's, for an organization to have the longevity that they've had, they're certainly onto a good thing. But I was there at a really interesting time, and similar to yourself, Simon, I think we passed the baton when you moved on as well. But to be right there at the time where there was the move from perpetual software to cloud computing, and to talk about things moving to subscription, was a real shake-up to an organization like SAP that was so structured around profit margin of an initial sale. They were a margin-driven business to then move into a subscription economy where you're now getting a payback over a 36-month horizon rather than a 24, 36-month sales cycle with then one lump sum payment and then a 20% maintenance kind of recurring. It was a really interesting transition to see how process then followed some of those changes, and then to go to Salesforce that effectively pioneered cloud CRM and really owned that subscription space and made a big point of being that almost the antithesis to old school software. It was an exciting time to see both, and I think being able to bring that rigid process of SAP, as well as the disruptive mindset of early Salesforce across to a young organization, an Australian organization like Marketplace, I think has really helped me to be able to pick and choose those pieces that I found really valuable from two really, really successful organizations that both approach things in a pretty different way. It feels like it's
very, very different.
It's going to help us here. Yeah, I think so too.
I guess my experience, interestingly, was I think at SAP, being European, I got a very distinct sense of a consensus culture and decision making. So typically, you'd have a group of people in a room, you'd debate and argue what you wanted to go do, and then a consensus is made. And I think the upside of that is lots of stakeholders have input. The downside of that is sometimes decisions take a long time to happen. For me, when I transitioned from SAP into Salesforce, into very American cultured business, it was very much a command and control type culture. I'm your boss. Here's what you need to go do. Here are the metrics. Go get it done. The upside of that is decisions were made rapidly. The downside is often consensus or an understanding of why you're doing things was a little bit different. That's my experience. I don't know whether you experience anything similar. And I guess interestingly, working for an Australian company now, is that different again?
Yeah, look, it's I do agree. Look, I think that's a pretty accurate assessment. For me, working for an Australian organisation, it's interesting. Aussies in general, as a mindset, we're um, quite self-deprecating, but what that also means is that it feeds into this kind of tall poppy mentality in Australia. It's something that's ingrained in us as much as we try and shake it off. The Americans are unashamedly the opposite. And when it comes to selling into America, working in American organizations, they love supporting the champions. They love supporting the stable, predictable choice. And it is what that means is a disruptive organization trying to grow into North America, and it makes that quite tough. Whereas what I've found with the Europeans and Australians in general is that they love finding an innovative alternative. That you've got a market leader in one category. They love looking for something that can be a challenger or a disruptor to the status quo. So as a challenger organization cracking into new markets across North America and Europe, we've certainly found that those European consumers, European businesses are the ones that are actively finding us online. They're bringing us into their ecosystems to help understand how we can potentially support them. Whereas in the US, there is very much this view that once you're in front, you're going to stay in front, and we're going to keep supporting you to be the big leaders. And you can see that in the retail industry in North America. You've got within each category, you've got some huge dominant players. If we look in Australia, if we look in Europe, it's a little bit more fragmented. There's more localization. There's some more specialized offerings, and that's true of quite a few different industries. And so I think that relates to working in those organizations too. There seems to be a lot more of a view of challenging the leaders in outside of the US mindset. They love to hold up their champions and laud their champions, which is great. I think we're somewhere in the middle, and hopefully can pick the best of both.
Absolutely.
So as you've kind of transitioned from that perpetual space into moving into the subscription space, that gets really similar to a problem that you see all the time inside businesses, right? I don't know, price changes or your product changes, or I don't know, we're going to sunset a product, or any of those things that happen so regularly, right? As you kind of look back on those experiences, as you're going in the next thing and coaching your team, like, how do you get them to think about it and approach it? Like, how do they lean on the lessons that you've had in the past to, avoid the same challenges that you went through in your life?
Yeah, look, it's something that I saw firsthand. I mean, you see it through acquisition, you see it through changes in in macro trends and in opportunities. But one of the things that's been, I guess, drummed into me that I try and relay to the team as well is that now that we're in the subscription world, you don't sell a product. We don't have products. We're subscribing services, and we're helping customers achieve outcomes. So the product is dynamic. The innovation that goes into what we're delivering is expected to be continual. There needs to be this constant return of value, and I think that's something that needs to feed throughout an entire organization, from the way that you're structuring sales teams and compensation plans and customer success teams, and all of the functions around an organization need to understand in this economy and in this world that we're not selling products. We're subscribing services, and we're delivering outcomes for customers on a continual basis. And so, look, I think it's a very different mindset for an entire organization. And I think you need to make sure that from those product teams right through to your finance organization, that they understand that's the way that the business needs to be aligned. So it's seeking constant feedback from customers, understanding what's happening in competitive environments, understanding the macro trends that are impacting different markets, so that you can help your customers stay in front of those either opportunities or threats that are going to be presenting themselves. But it's an exciting place to be as a vendor, as a tech vendor. It means that you can have the shiniest toy at one given moment, but it can change so incredibly quickly. That means those organizations that do have longevity are constantly looking to improve, constantly looking outside or pushing the boundaries of what it is that they do to return continual value back to customers. And I think that's clear of those those businesses that have weathered pretty dramatic shifts in technology. Like it's a huge move, moving from perpetual software through to subscribing a service. And I think those businesses that have managed to weather those that are the most agile, that are able to adapt very quickly to circumstances as they change.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fair
Do you
enough.
think as we move, we're well entrenched in the SaaS model. Most successful software vendors, tech vendors, have discovered the service economy as a service. Do you think the model is here to stay? Can you see any, cracks? My own perspective here is, once a SaaS vendor becomes enormously successful, it has to continue to grow and continue to grow. And it's constantly asking its customers, beyond the value that you're already delivering, the per month, per year, whatever it is that you're paying, you're constantly trying to add more and more and more. Is that a sustainable model, do you think? I guess, you've got, the most successful SaaS vendor in Salesforce has sold a lot of software, especially here in Australia. And, how can they continue to grow? Is that SaaS model something that you see pervading the next 5-10 years?
Yeah, look, I think there's always going to be iterations of it, and I think within the subscription area, it's also broken down into a few different segments, from selling subscription applications through to platform and tools. I think that at a basic level, do businesses want to take on more capital intensive assets to use? No, I think they're still going to look to maintain as much as they can on an operational basis. But I think we're starting to see, or continuing to see, so much more technical expertise within organizations themselves that it's going to be striking a balance. So I think there'll be a lot more composable technologies where there will be best of breed in particular areas seems to be making more of an emergence. And Simon and Dan, you guys would have seen this in detail over the last decade plus, around seeing this shift from best of breed operations to then having one vendor lock in. And then now I think we're in another phase of seeing that break down again, where by having more internal capability, or the ability to stitch together solutions from different vendors and collaborative API technology, that means we're now in an area again of best of breed expectations, that organizations are not necessarily willing to compromise on capability just because they receive one invoice rather than five. I think there's internal technology teams that can now piece together the best of what technology has to offer to deliver a differentiating brand or employee experience or financial experience. So I think organizations that have grown breadth by acquisition, the expectation on each one of those components is now going to be higher. I think the days of, we're an SAP shop or an Oracle shop, and everything is going to come from those two vendors. Whether we'll go back to that at some stage in the future, but I certainly think we're at a stage at the moment with open API frameworks and the ability to pull together technologies from different bases is going to now mean that there's more pressure on those big organizations to focus on the individual components being able to stand at value when they're under a microscope individually, rather than just because they are big, do they deserve a larger share of wallet? I think each piece is now going to have to stand on its own 2 feet, which is, as far as I'm concerned, in being a best of breed provider ourselves is a good place to be.
Do you think that best of breed provider, I completely agree with you. It's an interesting one. That for me has a couple of sort of follow-on effects. I think it means that the role of the CIO, which 5-10 years ago was looking like it was going to be a declining in importance, probably means the CIO, and by definition the CFO, who has to pay the bills, you really need to have a better understanding of your architecture strategy, because no longer are you relying on a single platform or a single vendor just to sort it all for you. You pay the bill to Oracle or SAP or Salesforce, and your whole platform's sorted. And now you're looking at I won't say hodgepodge because that's unfair, but a lot of different stakeholders in your business's success, and you've got the best of breed, and stitching those together knowing how they can all come together and add value to what you do for your end customer. I would imagine as a sales professional, you have to be a lot closer to advising the CIO on the right overall architecture.
Absolutely. Look, I think it's more critical than ever that there is a strategy across the board when it comes to technology consumption and proliferation. Like, because of this, it's so easy to then have, a fragmented system where different business units and different functions are heading in different directions, and that obviously exposes inefficiencies and security holes and challenges across the board, and raises a risk profile, which is really going to be the core focus of the CIO as well. From a tech standpoint, it's going to be risk mitigation as well. How do they get to a point where they're ensuring business growth and continuity, but at the same time really owning privacy, security as those components as well. So look, I think it's critical that there is a strategy to start with. I think we're seeing more and more requirements on vendors to understand the complexity of buying environments. And to the numbers of folks that are in a room now when you're going through a pitch for any product is huge, from technology representatives to finance and supply chain and legal and risk. There's stakeholders from all over the business. So the expectations on vendors now trying to sell into those environments is going to continue to increase. You need to be able to understand the relationships within an organization. You need to understand those factors that are important to different stakeholders, whether they are economic buyers or technology buyers or business users, and really contextualize the message across that group.
Absolutely.
And it can certainly be, it can be dangerous to make assumptions. I mean, whether it's around the role of a CMO or a CEO or chief supply chain officer, businesses are all different in terms of the influence of different areas. So I think it's Dan actually you posted on LinkedIn the other day, which I really enjoyed, which is just around the discovery process, that it has to be perpetual. You always have to be listening to what your customers are going through, whether you've just sold a product, whether you sold it 2 years ago, whether you're planning on selling it in 9 months' time. It's about listening, researching, and understanding the context of the customers that either you get the privilege to work with, or you look to get the privilege to work with.
I think it's also that we've evolved in expectations as a market to 5-6 years ago, you were okay with off the rack. And because off the rack gave you scale, it was faster, the tech was hard to work with. But now what people are looking at is actually I need bespoke. And I'm going to choose the right pants and jacket and tie and vest, and I'm going to choose exactly what my business needs, and I need to ensure that happens today, and it happens in 6 months, and happens in 6 years' time. And I think that's the challenge of that's the real challenge of the cloud software vendor is if I've sold a deal, or it's of any organization today. I can be a customer of a large of Sony buying a television, but once I transact, I'm still a customer, but there's no more benefit for Sony. That benefit's already happened in the past, right? Whereas my perception, particularly in anybody delivering a long-term service, not just software, is that every time I transact with you, every month, quarter, year, whatever it is, I'm expecting I'm going to get another chunk of value beyond what you already delivered to me. And that value's got to continue to increase. And now that can be often particularly what we sell in software, the benefit of one piece of software plus another piece of software is more than, the sum is more than the value of the parts. That's the whole concept. But, when you're looking at these engagements that people are trying to define today, and it's why you've got so many stakeholders internally looking at, well, if we add this on to what my plans are, how does the sum become more than the value of the parts, or is it going to become detrimental to what I'm trying to do over here? And that becomes a hard road for people to navigate as a salesperson, right? So in the past, you would just be okay with knowing your stuff. Right, my kit, I know what it does, I know what it changes. Now I need to know your kit as well. I need to know how you're thinking about everybody else's kit, and and how that's going to impact your business, because I need to be a trusted advisor to you in all the decisions you're making, not just should you or shouldn't you buy my kit. I think that becomes...
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's, for me, that's the role of a sales leader within this organization as well. It's not just, managing a forecast and managing a number, but certainly looking at how we're continually upskilling the teams that we have the privilege to lead. So, what you mentioned is it rings true in my world right now as well. If I look at the transition or the evolution of Marketplacer as a business. So you have a history of owning and operating marketplaces. This goes back sort of 7 years, and making the transition into becoming a SaaS organization that provides the ability for e-commerce businesses to operate effectively as a marketplace themselves, to sell third-party products. As a business ourselves, we came into this, so I'm now almost 2 years into the organization, and were absolutely marketplace experts. We understood all of the factors that go into owning and operating a marketplace. What are the financial dynamics? What are the opportunities? What are the challenges? And over the last 18 to 24 months, we've certainly seen that shift a little as the technology itself, or the offering itself, has become more widely accepted, and we're seeing more brands embrace different versions of dropship and endless aisle and range extension, a lot of different flavors of what we do. But what that means is our teams no longer just need to be marketplace experts. They need to be e-commerce experts, and they need to understand what's driving retail trends, what's driving the decision-making processes of e-commerce leaders and chief digital officers and chief financial officers in our industry. So what that's meant is actually what we bring in every Tuesday at our sales meeting. 50% of our sales meeting, we bring in an external representative from one of our tech ecosystem partners. So these are not necessarily integrations of ours, but we just reach out to anyone that's in the industry. So whether it's an iPaaS provider, an e-commerce platform, an OMS platform, a merchandising platform, something that is on either the wish list or on the application desktop of our customers. And the entire goal is to get my solution engineering team, sales team, and customer success team to learn more about those factors that our customers are dealing with every day. So how is AI impacting their ability to run predictive search? What are they looking at in making those decisions? And that makes us better vendors in terms of understanding more about what our customers are doing. So I really look to facilitate a period that we can set aside every week that has nothing to do with us really selling more, and more about us being better professionals in the e-commerce space as well.
Absolutely. So it's an interesting concept, obviously, moving to more bespoke solutions. We talked about the complexity for the CIO. Reflect back for a minute when I guess the three of us were working at Salesforce, and one of the mantras we had there was the customer master record was at the center of everything, and you couldn't afford to have multiple views of your customer. And I think, by definition, what we're talking about here is saying, well, actually, that's no longer is the imperative. I think the importance is you've got the right bit of software to solve the right application. But I think you've got to a point now where you may have a customer master record in your CRM system, something in your marketplace solution. You may have an ERP solution with a customer master record. And we could talk about the integration software that pulls it all together. But I think it's an interesting one that dynamic has shifted. And I think that, the concept of data lakes and analytics, et cetera, that bring it all back together is probably something that's radically changing. And I think, certainly the success of organizations like Databricks and Snowflake are probably the outcome of big companies, small companies that have a lot of different best of breed solutions. But at the end of the day, decision support and knowing your customer certainly hasn't gone away. Are you seeing that sort of shift as a baseline based on the best of breed type approach?
Yeah, look, I think absolutely. I think the ability to create, we talk about it. We talk about a single view being this sort of goal that we're looking towards across the board, a single view of customers. But I think what it means now is that you can have multiple different views, but all access to the same piece of information. So having the same dashboards across the business. certainly doesn't help anything. You end up with these giant dashboards with 600 different inputs that everybody's looking at, which then becomes noise. Whereas just ensuring you're referencing the most up-to-date information, you're referencing the same point, having the flexibility to view your corner of the world in the way that you want to do it is critical. I mean, we've gone through a process on our product side as well, where we've effectively underpinned our entire offering with Snowflake, really driven by the idea that the customers that we were, or our marketplace operators, the customers that we work with, we started building a whole lot of dashboards to give them access to, so they could see real-time supplier data. They could see all of their real-time performance, product performance, and basically running a general ledger. But over time, we saw that there were more and more stakeholders on their side that just wanted to extract the data, to use the tools that they were already used to using, but still maintain that real-time view of everything that's happening in the marketplace world, and then put that alongside their in-store results, their e-com results, to get a real view of everything that their customers are doing as well. So I think what we've seen and look to underpin our product with as a strategy is flexibility of data consumption. So being able to have the same view of the data that you need, but being able to have the autonomy within a business unit, within a function, in order to consume that and visualize that in whichever way you need. So I think what that then does is it continues to fuel this best of breed approach that says it's not, I don't need to have all of my applications with pre-built connectors, or to have them all sitting under the same underlying data structure, because then is now the ability to leverage those best of breed applications and yet still get the same flexibility of data consumption. So I think it's one of those technologies that has then bred a whole range of others that have very quickly accelerated on top of them, and that's certainly true in the application space. And now even again, I think I've just come back from a conference in Europe. I went to the Shop Talk conference in Barcelona, and I think every presentation over the 3 days was around how AI is improving something or impacting some part of the business landscape. And I think we're only just scratching the surface, but certainly having these transferable data structures has really been an unlock to being able to then have application specific or use case specific AI or generative AI use cases as well. So I think now that we have solved for some of those kind of underlying data issues, it's really now kind of set fire to when that hits the application layer and gets in the hands of business users. So I think it's an exciting time to see those technologies come together.
Absolutely. I think data has become a much more liquid asset. I remember in the good old days in the 90s, you'd put your data in SAP and there it would stay. And if you were lucky, there was some analytics that sit on top of it, if you were lucky. And now I'm looking at all of these different innovative vendors. They've all got their own platforms, but it's not impeding innovation. That your data has become a liquid asset that you can mash together in any way you like. And I think AI is going to be absolutely fundamental to bringing that together quickly, so you can make decisions before it's too late.
Absolutely. Look, I think that you touched on a couple of interesting points there that I think if we're chatting about some of the things that have changed over the last decade in tech, one of the most exciting ones to me has just been the collaboration of tech vendors. So, seeing a world like SAP where it would have been unthinkable to talk about their partnership with Microsoft, if we're going back, or partnerships with Google, to now see these businesses have really lent into the 1 + 1 = 3 value proposition for customers by being collaborative. And I think now having these ecosystems where it's not just we're fighting over customers, is that we're actually solving customers' problems together as vendors, has opened up much more of an opportunity to be collaborative in the vendor space, to talk about how what we do well can really multiply what somebody else does well. And that's been a really exciting thing to see change. It's meant benefits to customers. It's meant taking some of the the challenge out of incorporating best of breed technologies. And I think that the winners are across the board. Those collaborations have generated just such great results in customer environments before. And I think AI is certainly one of those spaces. I know it's still very much, in its early days, but I think, now looking at a point where you're being able to see what's out there in market, to collaborate with vendors that are really pushing the envelope in some amazing spaces, it accelerates the innovation potential so dramatically, rather than having to innovate in a vacuum and then trying to find an application for it. It's being able to really leverage other tech collaborators to deliver some really cool outcomes. And I think the more astute buyers on customer sides are starting to realize that as well, where they're starting to look to their vendors to be a part of their ecosystem and not just collaborate with them as customers, but collaborate with each other on how we're kind of able to innovate with others in mind. And I think that's something that's been a really exciting shift over the last 10 years, from, you're blue or you're red, or, now it's this kind of, it sounds cliche, but it's much more of a rainbow mix when it comes to the application colors that are sitting on anyone's iPhone or on their desktop.
I think there's also a massive ownership for you on the employee side or the salesperson side, to make sure that you know how to make all this work. I mean, when I first started in my sales career, it was all about just the core of your skills in that last kind of 3 feet working in retail, right? Last 3 feet between you and the customer. But now, particularly in B2B sales, it's about, you mentioned the data before, right? So which data or which customers should I be talking to now with which product, and what case studies should I be bringing in, and how have I kind of delineated down into the detail of why is this customer buying now, what's happening in their market, how can I learn what my colleagues are doing, either, the desk next to me interstate, internationally, like they're all the things that customers expect from you as an entry point, not as an extension. And the job of someone in any sales career, not just in tech today, is to have mastered all of those components now, not at some point in the future. And so it's interesting kind of watching all the different sales and leadership training courses, and they focus on so much stuff at the basic level, which is easy, and it's easy to sell. But we know of all those people that we've seen crush their number and exceed year on year. It's all the other things that they are experts in as well. And they've spent time, and you mentioned before, having the business acumen and understanding all about, your craft, your product, your market, what your competitors are doing, what your partners are doing, which SI should you put into a delivery program right now because they've got capacity, or they've got the right person, or, the best project managers just joined from somebody else. Like, all those things go to making great deals, and one great deal leads to the next great deal, and 2 lead to 4, and 4 lead to 8. This is just that momentum that an organization gets. And I think it's so interesting how much more learning salespeople need to do today than what they needed to do even 5 years ago. It's a constant.
It's absolutely right. There's, you see in lots of the, business books and others, when, there's reams of detail on sales processes and different things they need to do. But if I look at it very simplistically, for me, those that have been the most successful that I've seen around me, and those that continue to be, those that just love it, that really enjoy being able to upskill themselves and invest in their craft, and really learn those things that are going to be relevant to their customers. And there's an expression in lots of different sports and areas of taking an amateur mindset, which somehow amateur's been taken to mean somebody that's under professional. But for me, it just means someone that's passionate about doing something, and they're not necessarily just in there to get to, just because they're turning up to get paid. It's those that really enjoy being able to spend time, bettering themselves and investing in themselves and their teams to achieve those outcomes. And it's especially true now. I think you've got to really be staying in front of those things that are going to drive value for your customers. So I think when we look at technology becoming a bit more best of breed, there's almost the ability for tech vendors to have their salespeople kind of follow suit a little, given that you now need to tap into so many other areas. Being spread too thin when it comes to that product that you're selling limits the ability for you to speak to speak meaningfully across too many different personas as well. So in our case, just looking at how we can help you extend your range in ecom. Sounds like a very small area, but within it, there's so much that's important. How does this impact operations? How does it impact supply chain and finance? How does this impact your digital teams and merchandising teams and buyers? And if we were selling retail media, if we were selling e-commerce, if we were selling a whole range of other things, that exponential multiplier just takes away from my ability to really drive value around the service that we're looking to provide to customers. So I think that sort of deeper rather than broader approach is true for technology as much as it is true for the salespeople that represent those technology organizations as well.
So you're saying the sales guys that are modern successful sales guys will have, and girls will have, a much broader range than just knowing how to run a sales process. You obviously started your career in recruitment. You're a sales leader now. You're obviously interviewing a lot of salespeople. What are some of the modern attributes you're looking for in someone that you're about to hire that you want to put into, be a great salesperson for you in the future?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there are some modern attributes. There are certainly some classic ones. I mean, I think something that's clear coming from a recruitment background and then into being a BDR, which anybody that's in sales needs to go and spend some time on the floor as a BDR. I think it's just the hardest. It's the hardest seat in any tech organization. They do a spectacular job. But resilience is formed in those sorts of places. So in our industry, as we know, when you're running a predictable forecast, to have 3 times cover, there's not too many other parts of an organization where you're losing 2 out of 3 times, and yet you're doing a spectacular job to maintain that type of coverage. Like that's a hard thing to get across, that when you're doing your job exceptionally well and you're closing 1 out of 3 of the opportunities you're working on, there's still 2 out of 3 that are going another way, either lost to no decision, lost to a competitor. That means that there's the expectation on each individual to deal with that. How do you process the fact that you're putting in hundreds of hours into something that is likely not to have an outcome 2 out of 3 times if you're doing it well? So I think resilience is something that's very much been a key thing of those really successful salespeople and leaders that I've seen. Having that memory of a goldfish, you don't kind of sit too long on those successes that you've had, and certainly don't dwell on the losses. Take them as learnings. But one of the things, if we're looking at those modern attributes or more recent attributes that I really look for, it's those that have developed or have the ability to develop long-term relationships with customers and stakeholders. And I mean, especially in the 2 out of 3 of them that you haven't signed up as a customer. In a subscription world, everything is just another phone call away. So making sure that you're not setting fire to a prospect if you miss out on an RFP, if you come in second or third despite having it in forecast, realizing that the next time that they look to a vendor is only a short time away. So the way that you reflect your organization, the way that you put your personal brand forward when things aren't going your way, is a tremendous mark of if somebody's going to be successful in the long term. And I think it's, when I'm interviewing and looking at bringing folks into the team and looking at how we structure the team around one-to-ones and development plans, is really focusing on how they react and what are some of the best learnings that have come from not getting the outcome that you had hoped for. And then and I have the ability over the last few years to look back on those customers that you missed out on once, that have then come back and been your repeat customers, simply because you acted ethically and responsibly and behaved with the right attitude, and you deal with customers, partners, prospects with respect. And that's something that I think now in this subscription world that's a really exciting byproduct of that. It's not no longer is it 10 years until somebody's going to come back and have the opportunity for you to then work with a brand or a customer. It's really only any stage in the future. So I think those are the attributes moving forward that I think make for really great long-term salespeople, as well as just having that curiosity. How are you constantly looking to learn and looking to develop, whether it's, on something your customers are doing, something the product team's doing, and how the finance team runs. I think those sorts of areas really make for a good recipe for successful sales teams as well. And trying to get a mix of backgrounds and perspectives within any sales team in an organization just makes that easier as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that whole concept of becoming an expert in your space and really understanding, what your market and your customers need, it never finishes. Your customers change, your market changes, technology changes. Hey, AI and tech. 10 years ago, CRM upended the sales world, right? SAP was disrupted by Salesforce building and making CRM mainstream. ERP became an afterthought. Now we're going to look at the evolution of what, not just ChatGPT, but tools like Notion and others are going to introduce into sort of the way that we do work each day. If Gmail's if Gmail's sticking into and Microsoft are putting both into their email, the ability for it to recommend how you're going to write, if emails all turn up looking the same, how do you differentiate? Do you start to have to write poorly? Yeah. I don't know. I've got no idea. But as salespeople, your point of we only close, one out of a close rate of 1 out of 3 is amazing, and you're a superstar, right? But to get through that pipeline, if I've got to differentiate, how am I doing it now? Is it my personal brand? We've all worked for big either North American or German tech firms, and one of their big challenges is they don't authorize people to speak on their behalf unless you've gone through you're at a certain level. So how do I differentiate as a salesperson? What am I putting on LinkedIn? How am I putting out videos, or what am I doing to actually get my brand out there so that when I talk to my customers, they understand that this is someone that they should talk to? I mean, it's a challenging space for salespeople. I mean, you're quite lucky. You're in an Australian-based business. I do want to ask you about that as we sort of transition to the last couple of minutes here. Working for an Australian-based tech firm, I have to say, I am extraordinarily jealous. It's been something I've been doing for a number of years. I think the opportunity in the Australian tech market has never been better. So people looking to join the tech market or working out what their next career is, find an Aussie company, invest your time and effort there, make sure your dollars stay here. There's me flying my flag. But look, tell us about your experience of working for an Australian-based company, selling internationally. What's different? What's been a real challenge for you?
Yeah, the challenges and rewards are massive on both sides. So for me, it was great timing having the opportunity to join Marketplace when I did, and look, over a bit, I'll tell the story about sort of how it happened. But timing was great. Marketplace were a partner of Salesforce, continue to be a really strong partner of Salesforce, and I had for a long time, having worked for big organizations, you get a corner of the world. You get a product set, you carry a bag, you get a territory, and you execute that territory. You're fed product marketing information, product details. You've got a TAM that needs to be addressed. There's a huge amount of support to help you get there. You either achieve the quota that's been set or you don't on a quarter. I don't know, that's an overly simplistic view, but as an Australian, we're quite a way removed from things like product strategy. What's the product team building? What are the factors that are going into that?
100%.
And a big attraction for me in joining an Aussie company was that this is where decisions are made. Where you get to sit with the chief technology officer. We get to sit with the folks that are driving product strategy, the executive leadership, deciding what we want to be as a business, what identity do we want to have, and on a personal level, being involved in huge decisions of where do we open an office, what country do we want to look at, how do we localize the product for the UK, and some of the decisions that we made turned out to be, or some of the plans that we made turned out to be completely disrupted by market forces. What I mean is, we had, if we look back sort of 18, 24 months, we'd set out our annual growth plans, and here's where we had quota allocated. Here's where we're going to invest our marketing dollars. Huge focus around continual growth in Australia, launching the business and really accelerating the business in North America. And we put a lot of wood behind that arrow. And we came in, I think I came in the morning, and we had some inbound leads, started getting more inbound leads from the UK. And we sat down with the product team. We're not localized for that region, as yet. It's kind of tough for us to go after those kind of opportunities. And it happened a few more times. Some really noticeable global brands. We didn't have SEO turned on in UK that were actively trying to find who we were and what we did, and effectively inviting us to take part in RFPs, asking questions around what it is that we offered. And that dramatically changed the way that we saw the business. And I think, just by looking at that information, we could turn around in the space of a couple of weeks, sit down with the product leadership team, sit down with our CFO, sit down with business leaders and say, we need to be in Europe. We need to be in the UK. We need to localize our product for that region. We need to start putting in place a business that can support customers in that region, because they're pulling us over there. And so to be able to be in the room when we're making some of those decisions and look at some of these factors and say, we're going to go after that opportunity. And if we look now, we've got 5 or 6 full-time folks out of the UK. We've got some of the most noticeable household brands as customers that we get the privilege to work with out of the UK and out of Western Europe. And it continues to be one of our fastest growing markets. And all of that's happened without us being intentional about it. So I think, it's been really exciting on a personal level to see the impact that you can be a part of when working at the HQ of an organization, especially one that's in very much that startup scale up mode. We're going from a fairly small market in Australia, and then you're having the ability to execute with some of the biggest brands on a global basis has been really, really cool. On the other side of it, you're so used to having support in big organizations. They do it so well in terms, sales operations and deals desks and customer success and support and training and enablement. The number of times that I figured out over here in the first few months of asking, the question of, who's responsible for ... And then if there's a pause of longer than 3 seconds, that it's you. And that happened every single time in the first few months. And right, okay, I got to do that. And so it's how are we forming a proper sales methodology? How are we looking to build predictability into our forecast? How are we looking to grow into these markets and show the business, how we're performing? And it's been and continues to be a really satisfying thing to be a part of, feeling like you're building something. And the last piece on that was, it was really driven by a lot of the old guard at Salesforce, and both of you would know many of them that were there a long time ago. And so often when networking with those colleagues, they would talk about what Salesforce was like 15 years ago. And I had the same from SAP. We saw Jim Hagemann-Schnabel when he retired. He came and spoke about what it was like to work at SAP in the 90s, and talking about how dynamic and exciting it was to grow a business like that. And similar for the folks at Salesforce that were there in the early days. I wanted the same thing. I wanted to go to an organization where, I could say, like, we were there at the start, and it wasn't all the best years were 10 years ago. And you only get a few chances like that in your career to work for somebody that you're really excited to work for in an Australian-based organization with a really clear market opportunity from a kind of technology perspective, that are just all the kind of stars aligned for me on a personal level. And it's something that's been immensely challenging in lots and lots of different ways. But I certainly think for those, particularly in Australia, that get a chance to work for a great leader, to grow an Australian business on an international basis, it's a pretty exciting and irreplaceable thing to be a part of.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm super jealous. It really is. It's putting back into our own economy, putting back into our people here. As you said, to be able to have the opportunity to not just be a sales office, but to be involved genuinely in, how are we building the product, how are we changing our go-to-market, and also be able to put a bit of an Australian culture out there. I mean, Australian companies typically have such a great reputation in terms of the culture we've got. I mean, there's some phenomenal Australian success stories in tech, Latty and Canberra and others who are just killing it out there. There's some amazing VCs that are really supporting the growing Australian tech market. EVP, Airtree, and a bunch of others who are doing just phenomenal investment stories, and tech firms that have got a huge opportunity. And it's, one final question for me before we kind of wrap up. We're getting close to the top of the hour. You guys have almost been fervent in keeping your roots firmly in the country. How hard is it for an Australian tech company to not kind of chase the opportunity in North America and think about picking up the business and moving it over there? Has that been a real challenge for you guys?
Yeah, look, it always is. It's a perpetual challenge, and look, I think like every organization, you see the shiny thing, and you want to go after it for sure. Look, it continues to be a challenge, but one of the things that we do revert back to is culture, and I think it's being able to have close ties into HQ is something that's always been a really strong suit for us. So one of the things that we did learn, through error in the way that everybody does, is when we are launching and when we've been launching into these new regions, really being able to look to our existing internal trusted teams, understand what is ahead of them career-wise, and being able to look to support that through international travel and relocation. It's amazing. You get these fantastic, Aussie professionals that would love to spend 2 years in London, that would love to spend, some time working in the States. And a lot of our leadership team now in North America and in Europe have been trusted members of our team from here. And we didn't do that initially. The first move into the US some years ago, it was really around, right, we need local network. We need a local, resourced individuals and teams that have, tapped into all of the business stakeholders. Whereas what we found is that we then kind of lost a bit of what made us, really unique and special and different. So a big part of what we've looked to do is to transplant, Aussies that want to go and, take our product abroad and take their families on opportunities to travel and see other parts of the world and other cultures as well. So, we look around, our SAP office and Salesforce office, as all of you have done many times, and there's accents from all over the world. So, it's really great to be able to return the favor and put some Aussie accents in Denver and in London and take our message and retain some of the culture that we have and the business culture. So, that was certainly a learning for us. It's hard to just hire overseas without, having a nucleus of, some trusted team members to kick it all off.
That's fantastic. And I mentioned, Brad, having HQ here, your forecast calls will be all about people around the world looking at what time it is in Sydney or in Melbourne.
Exactly.
Or
being able to forecast
the other way around.
Forecasting in Australian dollars is awesome. I know it sounds like a novelty, but having spent it before in US and euros and now being able to forecast in AUD, it's great.
We've got to run.
We've got to make that continue. And
okay, got to run a second on that about what it's like in Australia to forecast in US dollars in the wrong time zone at 5 in the morning, all that type of stuff on a Saturday.
Yeah,
exactly.
I reckon there's a workshop on how to sound intelligent at 2 a.m.
How to stay
absolutely. Hey, Brad, we're coming to the top of the hour, mate. Thank you so much for your time. It's been fantastic to hear about your journey. It's been awesome to hear about working for an Australian headquartered company as well. Again, best of luck in the future, and I hope Marketplace goes from strength to strength. And thanks a lot for your time, Dan. Another awesome chat.
Yeah, absolutely. And for everyone listening, wherever you listen to this to, whether it's on YouTube, Facebook, on LinkedIn, etc. Look, please do, like the session, subscribe to the channel, share it with your friends. We'd really appreciate that. And look, if you'd love to join the podcast, or you've got some questions from myself, Simon, or Brad, please ask it. We'll feed those through and answer as we can. And we look forward to giving you some more great content coming up shortly. Thanks so much.
Great.
Thanks very much,
guys.
guys.
Thank you.